Hi, my name is Ashley and I'm a mom of 2 little girls. I have a 5-year-old named Kylie and I also have a 3-year-old named Mia. For today's video, I'm going to be answering a question that I received from a parent, Suhaila, over in the Netherlands. And the question reads as follows. Getting dressed and ready for the day is really a struggle with my almost 4-year-old boy. We work with routine cards, but still, he doesn't even have a look at them. How do I get him motivated? If he's not willing to, how to approach the situation? Also, I am always having in the back of my mind to follow my child and his interests, but he really has no interest in cleaning after him, and I don't see this changing anytime soon. However, I do think that, especially approaching 4, he should at least be used to bringing his plate to the kitchen after eating. You do have a video on this, and a tip you gave was to leave the plate exactly where it is and serve the next meal next to it. So that's what I have done a couple of times, but he doesn't really care. So now I'm literally looking at his bowl of pumpkin soup that we ate 3 days ago, which is still on the table. I thought maybe if he sees it change and get nasty, he will realize that it needs to be brought to the kitchen, but no success until now. So from one busy parent to another, today I would like to dive a little deeper into this question, into what feels like a very common parenting struggle worldwide, how to gain our children's cooperation in some of these very normal everyday routines. All right, so starting off with the fact that this parent mentions their child is 4 years old. That means that he is solidly in the middle of the first plane of development. That's the period from birth to age 6, the period of the absorbent mind. However, there is a break between 0 and 3 when the child is unconsciously absorbing everything like a sponge. They don't even have to work at it, it just kind of happens. They're absorbing everything in their environment, the good, the bad, there's no filter. They're just taking it all in, learning about the world. And then from 3 to 6 years old, there's like a little switch that happens where they're still absorbing everything, but they're doing it much more consciously. This is what Dr. Montessori referred to as the conscious absorbent mind. He's really working on developing his will right now and becoming an independent person, separate from his parents. And so he is consciously making decisions about the things that he's doing in his environment. Even though he's still absorbing a lot of it, he's exploring a little more. He's testing his limits and seeing what he is and isn't capable of doing. And a lot of times, no, and deciding that they don't want to do something that is part of the parent's agenda is part of that process. It is a very natural part of development for the child between birth and age 6. Now, we also have to remember that all children are different. Just because they have hit a certain age does not mean that they are suddenly ready to do certain things. Some children from a very early age express a great interest in learning how to dress themselves, and they take great pride in practicing these skills day in and day out. And then some children, it's just not their favorite activity, even though they are fully capable of doing these tasks on their own, or at least parts of it. And so this parent mentioned that they have started using routine cards with their child, which is a recommendation that I would typically make. However, it sounds like this child is not really responding to the routine cards. And I'm not sure if that has to do with the process of how they're being used in the home. That could affect it, but it could also simply be that routine cards are just not a strategy that works with this child. And that's okay. Some children are very visual and they will respond to something like that. But again, all children are different. We have to keep that in the back of our minds at all times. So at this point, we have to look for different strategies and try different things out, almost like a bit of an experiment to find what works for this boy in particular. What can we do to inspire him to be a little bit more motivated? How can we change his environment, change his routines from whatever they have been to create more motivation on his part so that it's not us constantly nagging and trying to get him dressed and reminding and maybe even doing it for him. So some things that I'm wondering when I'm reading this question is exactly what this parent's routine looks like in the morning, because they mentioned that they not only have a struggle with getting dressed, but just simply getting ready for the day. And I'm wondering if there are some things that could potentially be shifted to the night before. So if, for example, choosing an outfit for school or in the morning, if he goes to school, if that is something that is a point of contention, could you perhaps do this the night before as part of the bedtime routine? You know, hold up 2 choices for your child and say, which outfit would you like to wear tomorrow? Have him make that decision before the actual dreaded morning routine begins, when the tension typically exists, kind of like a more neutral time. have him choose the outfit then, and then lay it out so that it's ready to go, and that's one less decision that he needs to make the next morning. He can just take out the outfit he picked and he can put it on. Now, if it's the actual getting dressed part that he's having trouble with, then I would suggest actually sitting with him in the beginning and offering as little help as possible so that you're there and you are hands-on in the process, which maybe is what he wants. Maybe he's seeking connection, but that you're not actually doing it for him. So for example, you might help him lay his pants out, and then you can encourage him to put one leg in at a time and to, jimmy them up a little bit so his toes stick out, and then pull his pants up all the way on his own. You can encourage him to do all of these steps. If he's flat out telling you, help me, or you do it for me, then you can say, I'd like you to try. And again, keeping a positive tone always. You're not laying down the law like, no, you need to do it, because that's immediately going to invite resistance. But you're encouraging. How about you try? You put your leg in. And let him do as much as he is able and willing to do. And this is a process that you'll repeat morning in and morning out, slowly but surely giving him more and more responsibility each time. So you might be very hands-on in the beginning and helping him with most of the process of getting dressed, but slowly you're going to just kind of hands off and allow him to do more and more steps of the process until he's eventually dressing himself from start to finish. This is honestly the same process that I would suggest using with a child who is first learning how to dress themselves, but it sounds like maybe he is just kind of on his own path of development with regards to this, and so we're going to start at the beginning for him and scaffold the process as much as he needs us to. So again, just to recap for that part, we want to offer him choices. So, just 2 outfits just to make the choice really easy until he becomes accustomed to it. Maybe thinking about doing it the night before so that it's not something that he has to think about in the morning when he's feeling groggy and not really motivated to get ready. This way that choice is already made. And then encouraging him to take over those steps of learning how to dress himself a little bit at a time, knowing full well that we're going to need to be a lot more hands-on in the beginning, and then slowly, maybe still just sitting there, but being more hands-off until he has fully mastered the routine and you feel comfortable, you feel confident that he will be able to get himself dressed even when you're not in the room. And then you can eventually start going on and moving to your part of the morning routine, maybe not necessarily in the same room as him. And then one other thing to consider, because I know that this process takes a while, it really does, you might have to consider moving your schedule up. So build a little bit of extra time, however much extra time it takes. If you find that we're constantly wasting 20 minutes with the struggle of getting dressed when it could be done, in less than 2 minutes, then build in an extra 20 minutes into your schedule in the morning, knowing that this is going to take some time and practice on his part. And you don't want to be rushing him through it, because the more a child feels rushed, the more they are going to resist. And so we want to give them as much time as they need, knowing that they are going to move at a slower pace. So does that mean that you need to set your alarm clock to get up a little bit earlier? Yes, and that is not ideal, I know. Nobody wants to think that they have to get up even earlier than they already are in the morning, but it's a small sacrifice to make, I think, in the grander scheme of things, to know that this is ultimately going to help your child to become a little bit more motivated and inspired to take over these parts of the morning routine for himself. Now, does this mean that you have to get rid of your routine cards altogether? I don't think so, not necessarily. If your routine cards are something that help on occasion, but not always, and you see that there's maybe a potential for them to be reintroduced into the process and they could be helpful, then I'd say go ahead and leave them as a part of your routine. But if honestly, you know your child better than anybody else, and I always err on the side of my gut instinct. So if I feel like my child is not even giving those cards the time of day, they're just collecting dust, and that they're honestly adding more stress to the morning routine, then I would say just get rid of them. Put them away for a while, maybe never take them out again. Just go with what you feel is right for you and your child. And with all of that said, we also have to remember that just because our child masters a skill, so once he actually is getting himself dressed in the morning, that doesn't mean that they're never going to need our help again. They are young children. There are going to be days where they just wake up on the wrong side of the bed. They're not feeling it that day. Or maybe they're feeling a little under the weather. Or maybe some thing has happened at school, or some major event is happening at home, like you're moving, or there's a new sibling being born, like all these major life events. Things like that can really affect our child's motivation to do things independently. And so at times you might find that a child who is totally capable of doing something on their own will say, "Can you help me today?" Or "I don't want to do it. Will you do it?" And you know what? That's okay. When things like that happen, it is more than okay to help your child, as long as that is not the everyday expectation that mom or dad always does it. Then that's okay. You know, you have to be flexible. Life is not always black and white. It's not always predictable. And so you kind of have to learn to roll with it. But again, just remembering that just because a child masters it once does not mean that they are good to go forever. Just know that there are going to be times that you do need to step in and help, and that that's okay. Now, as to the second part of this question, this parent also mentions that this child is also having some troubles with cleaning up after himself. And they feel that at 4 years old, he should at least be able to bring his own plate to the kitchen after he's done eating. And what I have to say to that is, yes, that is a completely reasonable expectation for a 4-year-old. And I think it's fair to say that for most young children, cleaning up after themselves is not one of their strong points. Sure, there are children out there who have a very strong sense of order and they don't really need a lot of reminders around cleaning up after themselves, but I would definitely say that those children are the exception and not the norm. So it sounds like your child is developmentally where he should be, but he just needs a little bit more guidance in gaining his cooperation with remembering to follow through on tasks like bringing his plate to the kitchen after a meal. Now, this parent references a piece of advice that I gave in a previous video with regard to helping children learn to clean up after themselves, one that involves potentially just leaving the item out on the table to see if the child takes notice of the fact that they forgot, perhaps, to clean up their plate. And so that the next time they come to sit at the table, they see the dirty plate in front of them, they think, oh gosh, I forgot, and then they bring it to the kitchen. And with some children, this is a strategy that absolutely works. But for some children, it may not. Again, this is not a one-size-fits-all model. We have to experiment a little bit and try different things to see what works for our individual child. And this parent tried that strategy and said it just did not work. And that's okay. You know, we learn from our mistakes and our failures as much as we do from our successes, if not more sometimes. So we know that that's not going to work for this boy. So we have to think about different ways to do that. And it may be that he just needs a little bit more scaffolding. So what does this look like in practice? Let's say that your child is sitting at the table having a snack or lunch, and you're sitting with him ideally, because it's always best, if possible, to sit down and have meals with your child. That's part of that grace and courtesy and teaching them the value of having a meal together. So ideally sitting with them. I know that's not always possible, but still, while he's having his meal, even if you're not there, being conscious and aware of when he's getting close to being finished with his meal. And when he is finished with the meal and starts to get down from the table, the parent is there. They're on alert. They're ready, waiting for this moment, because they know that they're likely going to need to offer a reminder, especially in these very beginning stages. And they're ready. So he starts to get down off the table, and the parent immediately says, hey buddy, you may bring your plate to the kitchen and, you know, put it in the dishwasher or on the counter or wherever it is that you prefer that he places his dirty dish. But you're there, you're ready to give that directive, and you're using a positive phrase as part of it. It's not a command, go take your plate to the kitchen, because that immediately invites resistance. Humans, as a rule, don't like to be told what to do, whether they're a child or an adult. So we're looking for a more positive way to phrase it. So you're telling him what he can do. You may take your plate to the kitchen. It's a very distinct, clear directive for the child that leaves no room for misunderstanding. So at this point, the idea is that your child will hopefully respond to that positively and think, okay, and then take their plate, and then he'll take it to the kitchen. If, however, he does not respond and just continues to walk away from the table, then that's your turn as the adult to get up and just kind of gently intervene. Stop him in his tracks and say, I think you forgot to take your plate to the kitchen. Let's do it together. And then you can kind of guide him back to the table, let him take the plate, and then you can walk with him to the kitchen to follow through, to make sure that the task is being accomplished. And again, this is not done with a mean spirit by any means. You're not, like I said, commanding him to do it. There's no like sense of authority in the process. It's more of a sense of cooperation. Like, you're not taking it, so I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you follow through on this task that you're learning how to do. You're doing it as a team. And so you're gonna do this every single time he finishes a meal until eventually you will notice that you're not going to need to offer him quite as many reminders anymore. You can maybe leave it for a second to see if he responds without your reminder at all, and if he does it on his own. And if he does, great, but you're still there. Even if he does it that first time by himself, that doesn't mean he's going to do it by himself every time thereafter. You have to be ready and waiting and there just in case he forgets, so that you can help him follow through. Oh, you may take your plate to the kitchen now that you're done, and then allow him to do the task independently. But again, he is 4 years old, so these reminders are going to be required likely through the end of the first plane of development, maybe even into the second plane before it becomes more second nature for him, where you really don't need to remind him that much, if at all, anymore. And finally, I think it bears repeating that yes, there are going to be days where he is not going to be so cooperative. Maybe he's having an off day, maybe something has happened, maybe he's just not in the mood. You know, as adults, sometimes we wake up and just kind of feel grumpy sometimes and we don't know why, and our kids are the same way. So there might be moments where you may have to do the task for him. But again, as long as you're not allowing that to be the expectation that you're always going to clean up after him, then it won't be the expectation, you know, but remaining flexible always and remembering that our children are human beings. They're not little robots. They're not always going to do everything perfectly. They're not always going to do it every time. And we have to be okay with that. You know, like that's what we signed up for as parents. So just kind of going with the flow, just not allowing things like this to really get under your skin, recognizing that they are children, that they are learning how to human. You are their guide in life in learning how to be a human being. And this is just one small part of it. So just having as much patience as possible, giving yourself some grace, giving your child some grace along the way, and knowing that eventually one day he will get there. But you know, it's gonna take some time. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, then please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like more practical tips and advice for implementing Montessori at home with your children, then you might also consider subscribing to my channel. This way you don't miss a new video. My new book, The Montessori Home, Create a Space for Your Child to Thrive, is now available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook on Amazon and in all major book retailers. I also offer several e-courses. I also have an online community just for Montessori parents where I actually do live group coaching sessions on Zoom once a month. And for anyone who is looking for more individualized support, I also offer private coaching sessions. So links to all of those resources are in the description box down below. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.